December this year, but we had said we would like to leave room in case our calculation of the time that we needed was not correct. We would like to have room to be able to apply to the High Court for an extension after that, but we made it quite clear that we hoped that if we did need to make such an application, it would be for a very limited time for purposes of completing the report of the Commission. But ultimately, the High Court granted us more than what we had asked for. It granted us up to the end of March next year. But this was, the application was based on the understanding that the terms of reference of the Commission are too wide, and if the Commission was going to investigate all the matters that fall within the terms of reference of its terms of reference, it would take many years before it could complete its work in circumstances where the public and the nation would like the Commission to finish its work, particularly with regard to certain urgent matters such as state capture and so on. So we took the view, I took the view that we should focus on what I call the public protector issues. What I mean by that is those issues that the public protector in her report actually had in mind that the Commission would get. And I was saying that because when you look at those issues and you look at the terms of reference of the Commission, the terms of reference of the Commission will go much wider. And we are therefore proceeding on the basis that our priority is to ensure that at least we finish what I call the public protector issues. And just to refresh everybody's mind, the public protector issues as reflected in the public protector's report are very much issues or matters that revolve around the Gupta family and their entities. So that's what those issues are. But I did say at the time that issues that might not fall within the category of what I call public protector issues, but fall within the terms of reference of the Commission that we had already started, we'll try and finish. And that's what we plan to do this year, and that's what we are doing. Of course, as you will remember, early in the year, we did have public hearings in regard to PRASA and other work streams, I think aviation, and we were planning to have further hearings in April. We were not going to have hearings, I think, in the last 2 weeks or last week of March, and first week of April. But we were planning to have further hearings from around mid-April, which I think would have been after Easter's. Then, of course, the lockdown happened. But at that time, when it commenced, the lockdown was going to end on the 16th of April. So we thought that we could make plans for the resumption of hearings as soon as possible after the lockdown would have ended. We began to make our plans, and our plans were initially to start around the 24th of April, resume around the 24th of April. But once there was an extension of the lockdown, it interfered with those plans. And then we thought we would continue with our plans in May, because as you will recall, the lockdown was initially extended from the 16th of April up to the end of April. But once it was extended into May, then we realized that we just needed to stay put and see exactly what would be possible. Of course, under level 5, the Commission could only do work that could be done remotely. There could not be any hearings because it was not designated as an essential service. And at that stage, it was essential. It was entities that provided essential services that were permitted to operate. But under level 4, that is now during May, the commission was designated as an entity that was permitted to operate. But in order for it to operate, it needed to put in place certain plans and make sure that the spreading of COVID-19 in the workplace could be prevented as far as possible. So doing that needed quite some time. But also, I need to say that although during level 5 and of course under level 4, the commission did not have public hearings, that doesn't mean that work was not continuing. There is a lot of work that everybody was doing, was able to do, and was doing remotely. The members of the commission's legal team, members of the investigation team, and myself, when I left Johannesburg or Gauteng before the commencement of the lockdown to be with my family in Durban, I brought with me a lot of work so that I could continue working. So although we could not have public hearings as a commission during the lockdown under level 5, there is a lot of work that we were able to do remotely. And that is work that we were going to have to do anyway at some stage or another. So what we needed to do is just to readjust and do that work earlier. I spoke to leaders of the legal team and the investigation team, and they told me that their team members were fully engaged, fully involved with work. They were quite busy working from home. During level 4 of the lockdown, as I said, we were permitted to operate, but with regard to the public hearings, we certainly did not have those, but also with regard to the resumption of other operations that require workers to return to work, that did not happen because there were plans to be put in place to make sure that people's lives were not put in danger when they returned to work. As we speak now, there is an original plan, I've been told by the Secretariat, workplace plan for COVID-19, workplace ready plan that is in place. There are finer details that are being worked on in relation to workers coming back, and I'm told that should be finalized. Those details should be finalized next week, and that on the 15th of June, the personnel of the commission will be able to return. But even then, the attitude of the commission is those who can work remotely from home should continue to do that, and only those that really need to come to work need to go to work. But also all the measures that need to be taken in order to make sure that the environment is as safe as can be are being taken. Now, one of the challenges we had under level 4 in regard to the commission is that on my reading of the regulations applicable under level 4, even if I wanted us to have public hearings, there may have been challenges in terms of interprovincial traveling. My family lives in Durban, so before the commencement of the lockdown, I traveled to Durban, and I have to travel to Johannesburg for public hearings, and I go home regularly. I'm not the only one. Within the commission, there are members of the legal team who are in that situation. There are members of the investigation team who are in that position. So there's been concern to say whether or not if we went to Johannesburg and when we needed to visit our families in other provinces, that would be permitted. And obviously, we did not want to act in breach of the regulations. Under level 3, There have been some changes, some changes that have been introduced by the regulations, but not everything has been sorted out. But I've become aware of directions that have been issued by the Minister of Justice, I think yesterday. I've had a look at them, not completely, but it does look like my situation in terms of being able to travel from KZN to Gauteng for purposes of work and coming back to Durban has been sorted out. Not that it's been done for me, it's just that certain people are taken care of, including judges, lawyers, advocates, attorneys, sheriffs, and other people. So that's been taken care of. I've had conversations with the president last Friday and this morning. One, I needed to update him on the work of the commission because this is his commission, is the presidential commission. I needed to update him on how the work of the commission is going, but I also needed to share with him where we might be having challenges. And we had a discussion, and we had a discussion this morning. He has made it quite clear that he fully supports the work of the commission and would like to do whatever he and his executive can do to make sure that the work of the commission continues without any problems. Obviously, the work of the commission can't be done in the same way as it was done before lockdown and before COVID-19. Certain things must change, but at least in terms of certain fundamental things, I think there is no doubt that we, as a commission, continue to enjoy the unequivocal support of the president. There is a lot of support from the Minister of Justice and his acting DG and the Department of Justice team. There's a lot of support and cooperation that they are giving us, which we appreciate. So at this stage, it seems to us that there needs to be some clarity with regard to witnesses that we may want to bring to the commission to give evidence where they come from other provinces and not from Gauteng and metropolitan areas. It looks like that needs attention. It also may be that we need to look at the issue of investigators when they travel between provinces as part of their investigation, but also when they are in the same situation as me, namely they live outside of Gauteng, their families live outside of Gauteng, they need to go to Gauteng to work for the commission and be able to visit their families. I have no doubt, based on my discussion with the president, both on Friday and this morning, that the president and the executive will do everything they can to try and accommodate the commission in terms of where it may have concerns as far as the regulations are concerned. So there is a lot of support from that side. I think that things will be sorted out. As far as public hearings, because I know everybody will be asking when are we going to resume with public hearings. Before the end of level 4, alert level 4, my prediction was that under level 3, there would be it would be much more easier to do things for the commission, and some of the things that might remain a challenge now or remained a challenge until 2 days ago when the directions of the minister came up. I thought that there would not be problems. So I thought that we would be able to resume public hearings on the 17th of June. But once I saw the regulations, the level 3 regulations, I formed the view that there were challenges and we needed to try and address that. And that's in part why I spoke to the president on Friday. But the directions that have been issued by the Minister of Justice do clarify certain things. There may still be other things that need to be ironed out. And as I said, I think there's going to be cooperation from the executive. As things presently stand, it does seem to me that with the cooperation that we'll be getting from the executive, there is no reason why we should not be able to resume hearings either in the last week of June or the first week of July. We are going to make preparations to do that. But I must say that our focus is at finishing the work that we did in 2018 and 2019 to do what we call phase 2 of various SOEs, and then to focus on what I call the public protector issues. Already there is a lot of investigation that is underway by the investigation team in regard to the public protector issues. They are continuing with those, and the evidence relating to that will happen as soon as we have finished phase 2 in regard to the SOEs. We are going to do things a little differently this time going forward. Last year and in 2018, everyone will remember that when witnesses were called to give evidence, they were being taken through their affidavits and they would give their oral evidence to cover everything that was in their affidavits. We are going to try and do things differently now because of the time constraints, because of limited resources, and because we definitely want to finish the work of the commission that but by the end of the time that the court has given us. We are going to make arrangements to make sure that investigators or the legal team, they can interview witnesses and transcribe their what they get from them, the information that they get from them, as much as possible, which I will read ahead of that witness coming to the hearing, but with the aim that when the witness comes to the public hearing, he or she is able to just confirm under oath that what is in the transcript reflects his or her evidence, and then the witness can be asked questions in relation to only certain important issues and not on everything. But the public will still be able to have access to that transcript, just like we have been doing. So nothing will be hidden from the public. But that will give us a chance to have more witnesses per day than we have done before. Also, there may be a lot of evidence that will be placed before me by way of affidavits without the witness actually coming in to give oral evidence, but that would be where the evidence of the witness doesn't appear to be controversial. So we are going to do things a little differently, and you might find that going forward from now up to the end of the work of the commission, we don't have as many public hearings as we have been having in the past 2 years. And that will give me also an opportunity to look at work that needs to be done behind the scenes. The lockdown has also been helpful in that regard. I've been able to sit back and look at the work that has been done and review it. I've asked the legal team and investigation team to do the same so that we can look at what we've done and see where we need to tie loose ends, where we need to fill in gaps and so on. But also, once I have more time away from the public hearings, I get more time to give support to the legal team and the investigation team myself on the kinds of issues that I may want them to pay particular attention to, something that I might not have been able to do very well, for example, last year, because as you will remember, last year, I spent a lot of time at the hearings. We were having hearings week in, week out. That was fine, that was good, because this process needs to also help the public understand what happened, why it happened, and who was involved. And that process was important. But now that we are in the last year of, or last 8 months of the lifespan of the commission, we are going to be more focused. We are going to make sure that when witnesses come before the hearing, there is more focus on important issues and not on everything. I think I've spoken for too long. I must stop here and allow time for questions and answers. Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you very much, DCJ, for that comprehensive input. Colleagues, now it's time for us to put questions to the chairperson of the commission. I will ask that you raise your hand so that I can recognize at least 3 hands for now. But we want to cover as many questions as possible. Therefore, we request that we keep our questions short and to the point. I can see Angelo has raised his hand. Let's get another hand, please, from the members of the media. Clement, I see you as well. Who are the people? Let me just see on the settings here. You can go ahead, Angelo, and Clement thereafter.
Okay.
Angela?
Yeah, I'm here.
Just introduce yourself to the DCJ as well. Thank you.
Angelo Coppola here from China Global Television. DCJ, one simple question. When do you expect to hear or have the ex-president sit before you and give evidence?
I had determined a time when he was going to, when I was going to require him to come back, but that time had to change after the extension of the lockdown. But it is going to happen reasonably soon after we have resumed hearings. We still would like him to come and give evidence, and I believe that it's going to happen reasonably soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we now hand over to Clement to please ask the next question, and then Graham.
All right, Rev, thank you so much. Deputy Chief Justice, we really appreciate this briefing this afternoon. I've got 2 quick questions. One is on the letters that you have received from some of the civil rights organizations, non-profit organizations. They're asking for you to release an interim report so that anti-corruption agencies can start doing some work and start with some investigations. Is that something that you're considering, releasing that interim report? And I just want to find out, what is the financial impact of the lockdown on the commission? The fact that things have been, you've seen these disruptions as the work of the commission. What financial impact are we looking at? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clement.
Thank you, Clement. Let me start with the first question. I just want to say, hopefully some of the representatives of those civic organizations and NGOs are listening. We have not responded to them because we have been quite busy. We will be responding to them to deal with the matters that they have raised, but I hope that this conference might also give them information, some of the information that they are looking for. The issue of interim reports is an issue that has been dealt with quite a few times in media conferences that we have had. And the answer that we have given, that I have given, was that to the extent that the commission could find areas where it could prepare and hand to the president an interim report or interim reports, the commission would not be opposed to doing that. in principle. However, what I had said was that we have work streams in terms of the work of the Commission. There's an ESCOM work stream, there's a Transnet work stream, there's a Denel work stream, there's a PRASA work stream, and there are other work streams. There's a BUSASA work stream. There are certain personalities that you find to be to feature in a number of work streams. Now, if I want to say I'm going to do an interim report, for example, on ESCOM, I might have to make a finding involving those personalities or somebody who features in a number of work streams. And if I go ahead and make that finding in an interim report, I might disqualify myself in a way from hearing him or her in regard to another work stream. So I said that those are some of the challenges. So you find that certain names are mentioned under ESCOM, others under Transnet, as well as elsewhere. And it is better that one should make findings in regard to work streams where there are different people who straddle work streams when one has had all of them. So that's point number one. Point number two, as things presently stand, we are about about 8 months away from, or 9 months away from or finishing or getting to the end of the lifespan of the Commission. I would prefer to devote all my attention and focus to trying to finish the work that needs to be done, rather than try and do interim reports with regard to what we have done, because that also takes some time. That's what I would like to do. But certainly much earlier on, if it was possible to do interim reports, I was open to that idea. So I think as things stand, the circumstances don't permit, but I said to the legal team and the investigation team already, I think in 2018, if they pick up any area where they think I can do an interim report, they should make proposals to me. So there is that challenge. But what I can say to everybody, the entire Commission is focused on finishing its work within the lifespan that has been given to it by the High Court. We are doing everything we can. We are working flat out to try and finish the work that we can finish. In terms of financial implications, well, the financial implications that relate to the Commission really relate to the fact that our country, even before coronavirus, was going through a difficult economic situation, and the coronavirus and the lockdown just made things worse. Therefore, in terms of the budget, in terms of what the Commission can get from National Treasury and the Department of Justice, there are challenges, and we understand the situation. But what I can say, again, is what I said earlier on. I believe that the executive, including the President and the Ministry of Justice, as well as actually National Treasury, the DG, I think that they are supportive of the Commission. They are trying the best that they can. There are challenges here and there, but I think that there are attempts to try and give support to the Commission as much as possible. We all have to work within a very limited budget, and we have to do the best we can with what we get. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CJ. I'm handing over to Graham. You can ask your question, Graham, please. Graham, are you still there?
Yes, hello, can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, I can hear you now, Graham. Thank you.
Fantastic. My question relates to the following, and my colleague Clement Manyatela had already asked specifically about the interim report. But I'm also looking to ask specifically to the Deputy Chief Justice, how confident is he with the time running out? I think that's a big question for everybody. There's limited time left, and how does he feel personally with the time that's left? And secondly, where can we expect the specific testimony to pick up from? Is it still going to be PRASA related if things get underway from the end of June, early July? And then very lastly, also just looking for a little bit of clarity, please, Deputy Chief Justice, how many more witnesses do you, foresee coming before the inquiry in terms of the public hearings? Do you have perhaps a figure at this stage? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Graham. If I don't answer all your questions, you must just remind me at the end of my answer. One, starting with the last question, I can't give you an answer now on how many witnesses we are going to get. What I can tell you is that I have said to the legal team and the investigation team, but particularly the legal team, given the short time that is left, we must prioritize. So we are going to have to hear a smaller number of witnesses than otherwise would have been the case. But at this stage, they are going through, there are certain witnesses that are ready, that have been identified and that are ready, but they are not the only ones. The process of identifying others and sifting, because there was at some stage quite a long list, and which was not tenable. I said, you go back, you sift, you look at the importance of the evidence that each witness wants to bring. So I can't give you a number in terms of witnesses, but we are doing the best we can to make sure that we don't leave out really important witnesses and also implicated persons that need to be to come before the commission. How confident am I that we are going to finish within the time? I can simply say, when I look at the commitment of the commission's team, I think that we are going to really work very hard to try and finish. We want to finish. The will and determination to finish within this time is there. But at the same time, I must emphasize that we don't want a situation where anybody can say, in our determination to finish, we left out important things that we needed to deal with. I have emphasized to the legal team and the investigation team that as far as possible, there must be nothing that we leave out which we didn't apply our minds to say, should it be left out, should it not? If we leave it out, what are the reasons? Have we got sound reasons? So we want to strike a balance between that, but there is a determination to try and finish within this time. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, DCJ. The question about whether the commission is going to start with PRASA when it resumes end of June and July.
Oh, well, the hearings, the resumption of the operations when the personnel of the commission return to the workplace is the 15th of June. But the resumption of hearings, at this stage, I can't be more specific than simply saying, I think it's likely to be the last week of July or the first week of, last week of June or first week of July. The reason I say that is because there are still things that need to be sorted out. And I said to you that with regard to the regulations, for example, it's not very clear to us that witnesses may travel between provinces to come to the hearing of the commission. Insofar as we talk about witnesses who are from within the district of Johannesburg, it looks like there is no problem. But insofar as we may be talking about witnesses who must travel from one province to Gauteng, cross provincial borders as well as metropolitan borders, it does look to us that there still needs to be some work done in terms of the regulations and maybe the directions of the Minister of Justice. So all of those things need to be looked at, because we may be having certain witnesses that we might want to come and give evidence on at the beginning of the hearings when we resume. But if they might not be able to travel, we might have to adjust. But chances are that it's going to be either the last week of June or at the latest, the first week of July.
Thank you so much, DCJ. We've got Genevieve on the line and also Zen after Genevieve. Genevieve, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, DCJ. It's Genevieve.
Good afternoon.
It's Genevieve from the Business Day. While we're talking about time running out and financial impact, and then you say there are issues about witnesses traveling between provinces, is the Commission not prepared to do the questioning of witnesses over a Zoom call like we're doing now? Do you feel that the witness has to be there in person? You know, like you're saying, with the time frame not being too long, 8 to 9 months, would it not be easier to do it that way? Or do you feel it's prudent that the person comes and sits in front of you and the legal team? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would prefer that a witness comes to the hearing in the normal way. I'm not excluding completely the possibility of using Zoom, but I would have to apply my mind probably if we had to get to that situation. But the fact that we are allowed to have hearings the way we had hearings before, except that now one has to limit the numbers of people who come to the venue of the hearing, and various protocol or health measures have to be put in place. Except for that, I would prefer that they come to the hearing and they give evidence at the hearing. So I think that's what I would like to happen. I would like to avoid the Zoom hearings if at all possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DCJ. Zen Mate, your hand was up. Will you please ask the question?
Good afternoon, Judge Zondo.
Good afternoon, Zen.
Yes, Zen Mate here. One of my questions, I have two questions. The first question is, to what extent will the Commission be focusing on the private sector actors that were complicit in the state capture crimes, the banks, the auditors, and such? And the second question is, I remember when the Commission had begun, there was an intention by the Commission to include the public's voice in what would be its final findings, who bear the brunt of the impact of state capture. And I guess now with this refocusing and the Commission's time running out and the financial implications of keeping the Commission running, there's certain priorities that have to be made by the Commission, which is completely understandable. But to what extent will the voice of the public and attempts to include them in your final findings be made, even though we're prioritizing and refocusing as the Commission? Thank you.
Thank you, Zen. Insofar as the private sector played a role within the context of what I call the public protector issues, for example, if some company got kickbacks from some entity relating to an entity that falls within what I call public protector issues, they will be we want to include them. We are doing our best to include them as well. So that is so. But if it's an entity, or if a private sector entity was involved in something that doesn't connect it with the public protector issues, then we would try and avoid that because we don't have enough time. The public voice remains important. I believe that we will still have the public voice. What may happen is we may limit it to written representations. You might say, well, if it's written representations, not a voice, it's just written representations. But we certainly will have written representations, and we would try, subject to time constraints, we would try and have some public bodies speaking if we have got time. But certainly in terms of recommendations that the public wants to place before the Commission, that's still welcome. And indeed, there are organizations which have already sent some submissions to the Commission. I might not have read all of them, but I've looked at some. Some are very thorough, and they just indicate that the people concerned have taken their time to really try and assist the Commission. And we are very grateful to them. Obviously, at some stage, I will read them or summaries that may be given to me. So we will have that. But I also need to say then that we plan to, at some stage, have a time when Parliament could make representations to the Commission or appear before the Commission. This would be in the context of something that I've talked about in the past. When one looks at what has been coming out of the Commission in terms of evidence relating to corruption in various SOEs and so on and so on, members of the public are bound to ask the question, where was Parliament as all of this was happening? Because Parliament is supposed to exercise oversight functions over the executive. They can call a minister, they can call a DG, they can call the president and say, what's going on? Why is this not being fixed? So members of the public would be entitled to say, where was Parliament as all of this was happening? And one of the things that I've said quite some time back we would look at is how did Parliament exercise its oversight functions? Did it have enough mechanisms, oversight mechanisms, in order to perform their oversight functions over the executive effectively? Or did they not have those? And if they did have those, are they effective? Were they effective? Is it a question of Parliament didn't use mechanisms, oversight mechanisms that were effective or could have been used effectively, but they just didn't use them? Or is the position that Parliament did all that they could, but the mechanisms that were at their disposal were just not enough for them to do more than they did? This is important because, as I've said in the past, one of the things that this commission must look at is if state capture did take place and if one looks at the high levels of corruption that have emerged from the evidence of the commission, the commission would need to look at what measures should it recommend should be put in place to make sure that state capture never happens again, or to make sure that the levels of corruption are brought down meaningfully. And it seems to me that Parliament, by virtue of its oversight functions, has a big role to play to make sure that that is done. But Parliament must have adequate and proper oversight mechanisms, and then they must perform their functions in order to make sure that these things do not happen. So that is part of what we are going to do. And in this regard, I can share with the media and the public that I have recently been in contact with the Speaker of Parliament, as well as the chairperson of the NCOP, and they have indicated that they'll give the Commission their full support and cooperation. And I'm sure that in due course, we will reach a stage where we could have representations from Parliament, and or there could be an appearance to share information with the Commissioner to give evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, TCJ. We're taking a last round of questions, and I've asked in the group if there are any questions. I've got two hands that have shown up. One is Stefan from GateNet, and then Angelo, the last question for the day. Stefan, you're on the line.
Can you hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, thank you so much. Good afternoon, DCJ. It's Stephen from GateNet First Class. I've just one question. Some members of the public have asked, given the evidence that has already been brought before the Commission, they haven't seen any arrests. Now, in your view, is there something, in the form of evidence that law enforcement agencies can work with, for investigation purposes? Thank you.
Left to testify, and he said that he can't give a number at this point as they look through all that evidence that has been put forward. And of course, it will be difficult to pick up from where we left the inquiry due to having to have lockdown regulations and so forth. I do understand that the Deputy Chief Justice is back at this point. Let's take you right back there to that briefing.
Quite clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DCJ. Last question is from Angelo. We're online, Angelo.
DCJ, I want to keep it presidential for a second. Can you tell me when you're expecting President Ramaphosa to be appearing before the Commission? And that's it.
Thank you, Angelo, for that question. Before I answer that question, I think I must deal with a question that was not answered here, but I know that some journalist had asked at some stage, sent an inquiry to the Commission. That is where the application is that was brought by the Commission's legal team for an order that I should authorize the issuing of a summons against the former president to force him to appear before the Commission. I just want to take this opportunity to answer that. That application is still pending. I'm aware that the legal team did prepare replying affidavits to the affidavits that had been filed by or on behalf of the former president in relation to that. They prepared a response, that is the Commission's legal team, some time back before, I think it was before the lockdown commenced. So that application is still pending. The commencement of the lockdown just meant that we all needed to rearrange and reorganize, because certainly for the month of April, one wasn't sure when one was going to be able to resume work. So I just want to respond to that. In terms of President Ramaphosa, I had planned that President Ramaphosa would be asked to come to the commission around July. That was before the national lockdown happened. I had indicated, I had had a discussion with him, and I had indicated that that was the time around which he could expect to be asked to come to the commission. But with the fact that lockdown has forced us to rearrange things, that's not going to happen. So it's going to take some time before he appears. As I have said before, he welcomes the opportunity to come and give evidence before the commission. He said that already in 2018. So he will be coming, and we will obviously the public will know at the right time once when he will be coming. But he will come at some stage in the second half of the year.
Thank you very much, DCJ, for that. And the last comment or question is the question whether when is a statement going to be made available to the members of the media? Your written input of the first part of the briefing, but we'll deal with that.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What is the last question?
When is the statement going to be made available to the members of the media?
Oh, well, there is no prepared statement. I've been speaking to you simply based on what I know and brief notes here. I had intended to issue a media statement a few days ago, but I thought once I decided that we should have this virtual media conference, there was no need for a media statement. So there isn't a media statement that I have ready to issue on the basis that I've made myself available for an hour to discuss with you. But members of the media are free at any stage, if there are issues that they could not raise at this conference, to write to us and ask questions, and we will try and respond. We might not always be able to respond quickly because we are quite busy, but we will always try our best to respond. But also, as I've said in the past, members of the media, please don't write to us today and say that your deadline is tomorrow. Give us time, because we are also quite busy. Thank you.
Thank you so kindly, DCJ. And members of the media, thank you for participating in this virtual media briefing of the State Capture Commission. And hopefully that we will continue to engage with you. Thank you very much, Chairperson of the Commission, and thank you to members of the media.
Thank you very much once again to all of you for coming here, and thank you for the technicians and to you, Reverend, and other members of the personnel of the Commission. Thank you, members of the media. Once again, we appreciate your role in the work of the Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DCJ. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So, of course, that was the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo giving an update there on the state capture inquiry, telling us what's to happen to this point. A very important question, of course, from Angelo Coppola, asking when President Ramaphosa will appear. But it does seem that the Chief Justice at this point, the Deputy Chief Justice, doesn't have exact dates at this time, but an important question nonetheless. All right, we're going to cross over to our senior reporter, Samkele Maseko, who, of course, is covering this all for us. A very good afternoon to you, Samkele. Very important points being put forward there by the Deputy Chief Justice, saying that, look, we are going to finish this. We have a will and determination to wrap up the commission in the time that is stipulated. Talk to us about some of the other issues that are of importance that the Deputy Chief Justice had to kind of refer to this afternoon in this briefing.
Well, Flo, a very interesting briefing by the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, who chairs the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. What was very stern and coming out of that particular briefing is that the Commission of Inquiry will be starting its work by the end of June this month, which is some of the predictions that the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo has given at this press briefing, and that's saying that they will be sifting through the witnesses that have been presented, or the list of witnesses that have been presented to the Commission that will be coming to give testimony of their version of events of what transpired during the era of alleged state capture in the country. What was also rather interesting in that briefing was that not everything that is within the testimonies that will be written by the various personnel or individuals coming to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry will be examined and will be cross-examined there, that key points will be examined instead, and the Deputy Chief Justice saying that he will be spending more time with the team and trying to put them and point them in the right direction on which points to cross-examine and to sift through when these witnesses give their testimony at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry when it resumes its work by the end of June this month. In the last week, I'm going to bring in SABC News political editor Mzandi Lembeche on some of the key points the Deputy Chief Justice raised in that particular briefing, starting with the utmost important one of when the first citizen of the Republic will actually be appearing. Is meant to appear in July this month, but that's no longer happening. How do you see this one playing out, Mr. Major?
Well, I think what we've been saying, the buzzword, Samkel, is that given that COVID is with us, so we'll now engage in a new normal. So basically a new normal means doing things differently. And even when it relates to the issue of the commission, so it's no longer going to be what we are used to. And when it comes to the president, remember, everyone is looking forward to President Ramaphosa appearing before the commission. I think one of the key questions that the judge has always been asking, particularly if he wants to know why certain things were not stopped or why certain voices were not raised, he's always asked the question, where was the NEC? Where was the leadership? So remember, the president has been part of the leadership as the state capture was happening. So basically, the reason why it's important to hear the voice of the current president are those questions that the judge has always wanted to know. You would remember the kind of questions he posed on the former member of the NEC, or on the member of the NEC, Ngwako Ramatlod. He would say, so why, if certain things were done in a particular way, some people would not say? So it would be very interesting. I mean, he was the deputy president for the past 5 years, and of course, he's always been part of the NEC. So it would be very interesting to hear the president later on.
Another critical point was raised on the issue of the former president. His legal team did file their papers and affidavits of the former president's appearance at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. The Deputy Chief Justice saying that the legal team of the commission has filed their responding affidavits to the court. How do you see this one playing out of the former president, particularly when you look at the era of COVID-19 with the new regulations in place? They've been given the Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice saying that there will be movement between provinces of those who will be giving testimony within this regard in the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. How do you see this one playing out?
I think the easier thing for the Deputy Chief Justice in regard to those questions that were sent to former president is that the questions are there. And remember, those questions, Samgelo, they're quite specific. There were people who went to the commission and mentioned certain things insofar as the role of the former president is involved. So it will be interesting to see. I think that it's about 80 questions. So it should be easier, really, for the legal team of the former president to be able to answer each and every one of those. And if then the Chief Justice, rather the Deputy Chief Justice, feels there needs to be a bit of interrogation, so it will be easier because they would have seen the nature of the responses that would have been given. So I think that aspect for me will be quite easy. So as long as the legal team of the former president is ready to get him back to the commission, so it should proceed quite smoothly.
On the issue of specifics, the Deputy Chief Justice says this time around, the affidavits that will be disposed by every individual will be coming to give their version of events at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. Not the entire affidavit will be cross-examined, only specific points which he will help the Commission's legal team that he would want them to focus on and that he would want more clarity on. How do you see this playing out? Would this not be omitting certain information from the public that they would want to know when it comes to the issues of state capture?
I think the Commission is faced with a very difficult situation. One, there's no time. Already they've been given extension. In fact, when this Commission started, it had to complete its work in 6 months. But because of the enormity of the work, the judge went to court and then they got an extension of 2 years. Even that 2 years was not enough. That's why the judge again sought another extension. So you can't extend forever. So at some point, this Commission must end. But in the minds of the people as well is to see what sort of action is taken, because if there are indeed people who did wrong things, so you need to see the consequences. And I think the judge would not then entertain some of the evidence that is really not material towards achieving certain objectives insofar as holding certain individuals accountable. I think that's why he will make sure that the people who are really called are people whose evidence will really be material towards the accounting of those that have been pointed finger at. So it will be very interesting to see who he chooses and then how that information is gleaned through and what is it that is being omitted. But the fact of the matter is that there is no time, and the Deputy Chief Justice is racing against time. And not only that, the public needs to see and also know what is it that is going to happen if there are indeed people who are found to have done wrong things.
The Deputy Chief Justice also says that earlier this morning he had a discussion with President Cyril Ramaphosa. Last week he also had a discussion with the President. The President is very eager to see this Commission concluding its work, and that is to see the Commission also resuming its work. What do you make of the Deputy Chief Justice having so much confidence in the executive that is led by President Cyril Ramaphosa and the Minister of Justice, Ronald Lamula?
For any commission to succeed, you need the full support because they still need resources. And if you have the full confidence of the executive, of the president, so it means the Deputy Chief Justice will be able to have to do the work in a manner that will be able to be satisfying to everyone. But if, let's say, there was no support, and then he needed resources, he would not be able to do the thorough work. So what this basically means is that he's been afforded an opportunity to do the work. But for me now, Samgel, so what are those that are supposed to action certain things given what is coming out of the Commission? So we haven't seen anything as yet. So given that there's already certain evidence, and we've seen that the NPA has been strengthening in the past few days, so will now be some sort of movement towards holding certain individuals to account.
Let's speak on the logistics of the Commission itself now. The Deputy Chief Justice is saying that he's got some concerns when it comes to the Commission resuming its work at level 3 of the lockdown. At level 4, he thought they would be able to resume their work, but they couldn't. At level 5, he knew that they couldn't resume their work. He himself had issues of traveling between Durban and Gauteng. What are some of the logistical nightmares that this Commission may face if they were to resume its work by the end of June?
If the Commission resumes its work and we are still on level 3, remember, inter-provincial travel is still not permitted, obviously, unless certain circumstances. So that will still pose some difficulties. So it will be better, let's say, obviously we don't know between now and end of June whether we'll still be on level 3. But I think the President has indicated, in the previous interviews that we've had, that we are not permanently stuck on this level. So the country will be moving towards level 2. So I suspect that perhaps by the time the Commission resumes at the end of June, the country may have moved towards level 2. So which means movement between provinces in terms of the risk-adjusted strategy that we have, so will be permitted. So those investigators who need to go around, who need to go and see certain witnesses, should be able to do that. And of course, the domestic travel should be then allowed even more. Remember now, it's specifically for business. And the areas like hotels, so will start to open up. So if the Commission resumes under level 3, there will still be difficulties in terms of logistics. But I suspect by the time we go to the Commission, we may have moved to level 2.
On the issue of logistics, Mr. Mbecha, there's an issue of the witnesses that will be coming to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry and those who will have deposited affidavits that need to be cross-examined. There's an issue of the Chief Justice says he's got concerned about of their travel. Will they be permitted to have inter-provincial travel as opposed to those who will have permits for business purposes or for work purposes that they may be able to travel? So these are some of the concerns that he has. How do you see the Commission navigating through this one if we don't go to level 2?
It will be very difficult because remember, every time you travel on level 3, you must seek permit, and that's a process on its own. So yes, the Commission can be able to do some limited work, but for it to be able to operate at full capacity, level 3 will be quite prohibiting for the Commission. So that's why, I mean, my own guess, given what the President has been communicating in the past, is that at some point, and they also want to open up the economy, at some point we need to go to level 2, and then level 2 would really allow the Commission to operate quite optimally. I mean, under level 3, the operations will be very, very limited. Yes, they will be able to do one or two things, but many things would still not be able to be performed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mbecha. That was Zandile Mbecha, the political editor here at the SABC. So there, South Africans, you have it. The State Capture Commission of Inquiry may be resuming its work by the end of June this month, in the words of Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. But what was rather interesting was that the Deputy Chief Justice was also speaking and saying that throughout this period of the lockdown that has been enforced by the government of the day, the Commission from the government, particularly on level 3, on how some of the investigators that are used by the State Capture Commission of Inquiry will be able to move interprovincially to seek some of the evidence that this commission so dearly needs in unraveling the issues of the alleged, I use the word carefully, alleged, of state capture and corruption in the country.
The conversation there about really the logistics now that